I know a lot of you have made the upgrade to OLED recently. More than likely you're using one of the 1440p 240Hz panels because those have become a lot more affordable. Recently I've been thinking that next step is 360Hz, 480Hz, and for some people it is, but I think actually for most people it's this right here. Still 27 inches, still 240Hz, but it's 4K. It's the new PG27UCDM from Asus, and it's using the latest 4th gen QD-OLED panel. I'm just gonna say it, in terms of pure image quality, this is the best OLED that I've seen so far. Now, I'm not gonna spend 10 to 15 minutes explaining OLED and drooling over it again like I've done in previous OLED videos. I think you guys get it at this point. OLED is a completely different tier compared to IPS, VA, really any other LCD panel. So let's just talk about what is new and what is different here. OLED is not perfect. Specifically the QD OLEDs from last year, I had some problems with. One of them was chromatic fringing around text, around black and white objects. For me, it was pretty distracting. So have they fixed it here? Well, actually, kind of. There is still a very thin line of magenta or green that you can see if you're looking for it, but I'd say this is a massive improvement. I think it's mostly due to the fact that the pixels themselves are much smaller, so it's just less noticeable. But either way, easily the crispiest looking text that I've seen on any OLED ever. My other question was the brightness. OLEDs have been getting brighter and brighter as time goes on, so surely at this point, we're close to 300 nits. Actually, no. This is a little bit dimmer than what we've already seen. I've been told this is a final retail model as well, so yeah, that is a bit disappointing. With uniform brightness locked, I saw only 236 nits, and with non-uniform brightness cranked to 100%, even next to the first gen 1440p OLEDs, it is slightly dimmer. Not a massive amount, most nighttime gaming sessions this will be perfectly fine in my opinion, but it is still weird to see this take a step back. Something else I was really keen to see if they had fixed on QD-OLED were the black levels rising and shifting to like a dark gray magenta when you have a lot of ambient light in the room. This is not a problem with WOLED, it's only a problem with QD-OLEDs. Unfortunately, it is still a problem here as well. It does seem to maybe have improved a little bit, but yeah, this is definitely something that you'll still want to consider for your setup. Night gaming, again, it's not really going to be an issue, but definitely if you have like an overhead lamp or one of those BenQ monitor lights, this will 100% be a problem. HDR though has gotten a lot better. I compared the gaming HDR modes side by side, so first gen 1440p WOLED on the left, and then on the right we've got the new 4th gen 4K QD OLED. As you can see, the new one is much brighter overall and has way taller peaks. So all of those little HDR hotspots, those little sparkles in the image, they look much more impressive on this QD OLED. Aesthetically, the monitor does not look that different to what we've seen before. It's your typical ROG kind of gaming aesthetic. The panels are quite a bit thicker this time around, and whatever they're packaging back here, like the heatsink and the electronics, that is way thicker than before. I think that's also because the power supply on this one is completely built in. Not a fan of the new kind of gray chin bezel. I prefer the edge-to-edge design personally, but yeah, I have to admit, not really a deal breaker. This one also does have a glossy panel finish. Now, honestly, I'm not too fast when it comes to this whole matte versus glossy on these OLEDs. I think anyone who is too passionate about like what surface finish is on their screen needs to go outside or just get some help. I would say that matte is kind of a little bit more comfortable for me personally at my setup. I don't want to see like reflections on my screen when I'm trying to focus on editing or gaming personally, but I will say glossy is kind of technically superior when it comes to resolving all of that fine detail, and I do think it is likely the better option to pair with this monitor. I can't say for sure, but I don't know if all of the crispy, fine detail that I'm seeing on this monitor, even just the text, would be as nice with a semi-matte finish. We also do have DisplayPort 2.1, which I think only makes sense with the new GPUs coming out, which should have that connection. That means a higher bandwidth port, no need to use any display stream compression. The response times, nothing changed here. As usual for an OLED, they are ridiculous, 0.1 milliseconds, and the display latency is theoretically as fast as you can get for a 240Hz panel. Easily the most impressive thing about this monitor though is the sheer image quality. I mean, you might even be able to convince me this is a 5K or 6K display, because the way that 4K game textures look on this panel, it's the best I've seen so far. You know, we've seen 4K 32-inch OLEDs last year. I'm currently maining one on my desk, but just, I don't know, shrinking that 4K image down to 27 inches, the sharpness and detail is really on another level. This is the first 4K 27-inch OLED, and I would say it's easy to assume that all of that resolution is wasted on a panel this small, but I don't think so. I fired up some Battlefield, some Cyberpunk, some Doom Eternal, all with HDR, and they looked incredible. Versus a 1440p panel at the same size, it's about a 50% increase in PPI or pixels per inch. I mean, at this point, you don't even need to use any anti-aliasing because the pixels are so small. I will admit, for productivity, 27 inches does feel like a bit of a downgrade compared to 32 inches. With the 32-inch 4K I've got at home, I can use 100% window scaling and get a lot more screen real estate compared to what I'm able to get here at 125%. But for gaming, that extra resolution is definitely not wasted. Now, whether this is better than the 32-inch form factor for gaming, I think it's purely down to what kind of games you play. If you play more story mode, open world games, I do think 32 inches is better suited, but for more shooter-oriented games, this smaller panel is definitely easier visually to keep up with. In fact, I'm kind of crying on the inside that this monitor does not have a dual mode functionality, the ability to go from 4K 240Hz up to 1080p 480Hz. My current monitor has that ability, and the extra buttery smoothness you get at 480Hz, for the types of games I play, it is something I value a lot. If this monitor had that, I mean, it would be my new monitor instantly. But yeah, there it is, the PG27UCDM. I do think, honestly, 1440p 240Hz OLED is the way to go for most people. I mean, you take a look at something like the QD-OLED, which I reviewed recently, the value you're getting on that thing is absolutely insane. And those first-gen OLEDs are still incredibly good by today's standards. But with those new GPUs just around the corner, 4K is going to become a lot easier to drive, and if an RTX 5080 somehow lands on your desk, this is definitely a monitor that I would consider pairing it with.